Yep. Okay. You give me a feed, I want that.
This looks like trouble.
Oh,
It is. Speaking of trouble.
Hello. Husband. Husband's
Wife?
friend.
What is up?
no, no, my friend anymore.
You were not my friend.
No, my boss.
You should have seen Helen get in so much grief for leaving this cart in here. It's taking up valuable space.
Get the space.
She
Yeah.
yell at him.
Get the space. Whatever.
Oh, so I went over and looked at the space. Ashley and I went over.
Oh, I was just about to say it.
We could go over, although we have to get the guy, this guy can said that they have a big booth over there, and apparently he's co-opted the space and such a whole bunch of gear, which needs to be removed.
You talking about the space in the court?
No, over in Dirksen, in the hub room.
That's gross over there.
Yeah.
I was in there about 3 weeks ago for the first time ever. I didn't even know there were offices in that building.
Me 4 months ago, probably my first time.
God. And the stuff that's like there's a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Hey, if you have they have it's probably laying there
Hey, Cliff.
20, 30 years.
Talking about the area off of SubHub in Dirksen?
Oh,
District court.
This is a district court. I didn't even know there were workspaces in there.
It's pretty great.
Oh my God.
And it's like,
If it's gross, you live out there.
It looks like something you lived in.
I did live in it.
You should see his arm around the Olympics turner offer.
no, you
Hey, Cliff.
Alright, what's that?
You're the designated Olympics turner offer.
Higley's not really.
Olympics turner offer.
Sure.
How about the volume?
He's not really
If you knew what the rest of us know.
Volume down, right?
No, based on the amount of
I don't know.
noise that everyone's made over the last 2 days watching the
it's the
Olympics
hair.
all day
He said
here.
go over there, but
It's the only good thing on TV.
the door. You can tell him this stuff would need to go. But you have to take a look. Pete Messer wants you to take a look and then just tell him that this will work. It's over in Dirksen in the hub room. Like I said, you have to go
I feel like I'm gonna be.
There's a workspace over there?
in the hub room.
Say it
Yeah.
like that.
There you go.
I mean, I knew there was a space, but I knew the individual workspaces.
There are radio booths, and ABC used to have one there years ago. So he's gonna give it back to ABC. Well, I mean, it's theirs, and never was taken away. So,
There's crap in it, so it's space just using it as a storage closet.
They've been retired for 45 years.
it's,
Stuff is still there.
it's bigger than the ABC radio right here. It's maybe twice as big. It's still small, but it's definitely doable. And it's got you can actually get cables run over to, yes, yeah, that's what it is. This guy has a key, somehow has a key to it. So,
Sometimes from another network as a key to our booth.
spec net. Creepy guy.
I wonder if they practice sometimes going around the other way, just to even out that limit.
What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Mark and I talked about that. The guy,
He's in.
and then she did not
They
have
were
rather-
laboring under no all the illusion.
Well, they're showing in this rock walls as near as that I can back from the thing in the house. This is really special. This is out in front of Mall.
Because most people are right-handed, so they go
Ever
around.
being
kind of
used anywhere.
clockwise, so they can put their right.
You can't move. You gotta stand up. Yeah, I know, exactly. That's what I say.
Or if
You gotta stand there, you can't move.
No, it's got holes for your feet, so you can run inside it.
Hold for your feet, yeah, like a penguin.
Exactly.
So with your left hand,
So
you always
this
ask
like
you
keeps you
kind of-
warm and keeps the rain
Right,
off of you.
right.
Yeah, so is the inside of
I
your
mean, it's kind of brilliant, you know. I don't know if I do it out in front of
What if
Muller's
somebody's
office.
over here, like somebody can go over here, like what does he do? What if you turn it?
You do
You're
nothing.
gonna knock all your tent down.
Yeah,
And
plus
then do
you
you fall
shouldn't
down?
do all this stuff.
Right.
My joke is I'm giving how many homeless people go in there to make a phone call.
Yeah, we kind of funny about it. Like, flip the camera around.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And you go with
And
it.
he's like, oh.
Or it also saying like just
As those guys
two
who did
minutes.
balls,
Rolled over.
Put some
those
hot
balls,
air
you know,
in
they
it.
go in and play games with.
And
Those
he
things.
just keeps rolling.
Whatever they're called.
Or hot air, so it's
Yeah.
It goes kind of downhill.
starts goes up.
Chinese
Oh,
lanterns.
yeah. Chinese lantern. Oh, if you like, you know, go right. Yeah. The news conference, 15 minutes integration. It's the whole big deal.
Right, I want you to put this.
It's the only network that'll have them anymore. You know, when I told her, I said, so what happened? Why did the wife have to go to the guest and tell him she refused to work? I was like, what? He said, oh, you still having any problems with that white balance thing? It's like, what?
Can't hire good help these days.
Easy.
Yeah,
So how do I
my
get
lunch
here?
is straight ahead. Not on that part, but along the right, there's a team of Marines where it's, you saving this one?
Yes, I just want to make sure this works, but that's what you need.
Not mine?
Maybe it's, you're good? Okay, thank you.
Probably. We have two seats. No, two big ones.
Oh, it's not that.
Wife's in there.
So is this guy
My wife.
closing in or?
Yep. Oh, didn't she? I thought she was.
2 seconds?
But this guy has the whole record.
Yeah, he is the world record holder. I guess he's got it.
I guess the Dutch are going to be pissed that they didn't put him on the team last year. That's why he like went to Canada. And
See ya.
Was there already one shift here?
This is going on.
whoa, there's 2
I'm
laps
the
to go.
designated
Man.
turner off.
He's going to set the world record.
How much time?
He's got 1 lap to go. This is it. Final lap coming up here.
You're the bell.
You can
Bring
just-
it down.
Canadian.
He's a Canadian.
He didn't get put. He's from Norway. He didn't get put on the team the last go round, so he moved to Canada. His dad was born in Canada, so he changed his citizenship. And now he's about to.
What's his lead?
2 seconds.
That's a lot. I know.
In this sport, it's a lot.
That's it.
Well, 2 seconds anyway.
There you go. Number 1.
2.2. Wow. That's a lot, actually.
There's the guy.
Hello, Scott.
Wow, give me some love. Look at that. He's not even out of breath. He's going 25 laps. 6 miles.
Did you do it now?
Yep.
Yeah, he set an Olympic record.
And he just set an Olympic record?
Did he?
He's showing a little.
Because the guy before him had set the Olympic record and after he just beat it by 2 seconds.
Yeah, 2,000.
I like it. So like where the plug in is this gallery skating and just this like goes in and it's like a green thing, it's like minus 12 seconds.
Yeah, I know. 12 seconds.
Imagine being that dude ridiculous. This guy who runs and that one guy's really fast. That guy was really
fast.
You're 12 seconds probably left. But hey, he's everything.
Did somebody call the people in Florida and let them know that we're having a press conference here at the same time? 12:15. High school press conference, 12:15.
I'm recording again.
You don't want to go with us this weekend? You don't want to go with us this weekend?
I do want to go. I would.
Just take the bus. It's actually a long trip. It's not hard.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. There are a lot of them. I think they have their own time.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe you guys should come in, reach out and that's what might take care of it.
Yeah, well. Thank you, sir.
What are you talking about new savings? There's total savings.
Yeah, it says young and more, like, sort of 7 years.
You can also have a savings. Next time.
It's not that organized.
Yeah, no.
You here?
I don't know, even if folks are showing up, I have no clue. You want something? But it's on and ready to go.
Very no, I know.
That's amazing.
See, and it can grow anytime. I'm not happy.
Who are you? What are you doing, Brandon?
We're feet up with it.
They're all like that, Lisa. As you can't just say on your Twitter feed. You know, you have these little phrases like make it stop or whatever. Yeah, right.
But you know what it is? This week is bad, particularly because we have the grass is like 5 or 6
Yeah, it's kind of bad now. You're sick or you're not.
Airville
I
has
don't want to
He is just like this.
constantly having these like weird
Oh, my, yeah.
Tension going into it. Bottled up inside.
Pero no te no podía.
Better to let it out. Talk about cooling also. I told Jeff beforehand, I said, I think the cooling's always something to do for another single segment.
But I mean, he's going to.
Oh, I know. Yeah, but with the, you're just saying like if any, like if it was, it doesn't have to be just scenario.
Well, yeah, I remember at the beginning when we started doing it.
It's not a problem, because I don't have my laptop, so I don't know.
Part of the normal routine, which is good.
I'm a lefty too, so it's this guy.
It should be.
I know, the kind of stuff I look over. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
I got you. How long did it last?
About 45 minutes.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. I figured it.
Pays for the chauffeur.
Okay, I've seen the receipt.
Heads up.
Bring Angus in.
Yeah. Nice to have such a good group.
Shut her down. Shut her down.
Turn off your phone.
Yeah, I might get in the back row.
Come on in.
I'm gonna stand with the vertically challenged guy.
You're not as tall as Lisa. This is like. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Susan Collins, Senator from the great state of Maine. As the co-chair with Senator Joe Manchin of the bipartisan Common Sense Coalition, I'm so pleased to be here with my colleagues to present our Immigration Security and Opportunity Act, which will be offered as a floor amendment sometime today. I want to thank each one of my colleagues for their hard work and their commitment to achieving a bipartisan solution. I appreciate the leadership of Senator Rounds and Senator King and all of the co-sponsors who have joined them. I want to point out that this is the one and only bill that deals with immigration issues with broad bipartisan support. The bill would address two urgent concerns. First, the fate of young people who are brought to this country by their parents who entered illegally. And second, our porous borders that allow not only illegal immigrants, but also drugs to be smuggled into our country, devastating families and communities across our nation. We have provided robust funding at the president's level over 10 years, and actually require a 60-vote margin to block that funding. Among other provisions, the bill also prevents a parent whose dreamer child becomes a citizen from ever being sponsored for citizenship by that child. Now, let me say what this bill is not. It is not a comprehensive immigration bill. It is instead a good faith effort, a bipartisan effort to address some pressing, urgent issues and to lift the cloud of uncertainty over the heads of young people who are contributing to our society and our economy and remove the fear that they could be at risk of deportation as of March 5th. Again, I want to thank everyone who has worked so hard. Senator Manchin, my co-chair of the coalition, will speak next and expand upon that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let me just say very quickly that, first of all, I can't be more proud to be part of a group that come together truly as citizens and Americans and as senators working in a bipartisan way. I have never, since I've been here in the end of 2010, I've never been in a group that truly was so knowledgeable, so truthful and so trustful as far as in a group for 3 weeks, and they kept coming and coming and coming. So we always had 20 to 25, as you can see. And it was truly in a bipartisan effort, and that's the way the Senate should work, and that's the way it was intended to work. It's the way it has worked. Susan did a wonderful job. As Lindsay has said, we've used Little Switzerland's office here. Susan's office was called Little Switzerland, and it really worked and worked well. But we have a bipartisan agreement, a bipartisan piece of legislation that we think would really, really serve the United States of America very well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to some of the real workhorses that were able to put their heads to the grindstone here and make it happen. But Mike Rounds, who was invaluable to the committee and to the meetings that we had, did a wonderful job, as each and every senator up here contributed so much. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Rounds from South Dakota.
Thanks, Joe. Mike. First of all, let me just say that I appreciated the opportunity to be invited to attend this coalition series of meetings. I come in as a conservative Republican who truly cares about strengthening our borders. And I also understand clearly what's going on with young people who want to be a part of this country, these DACA kids. So coming from South Dakota, our interest was in trying to find some common ground. I found with Angus King, my co-lead in this, another individual who wanted to work together to find something in the middle. Our goal is to provide the president with the tools that he's asked for, $25 billion, to fund border security, to make that wall less porous than what it is today. Also, we wanted to begin the process of ending chain migration. This is not perfect in that respect, but it starts to make the steps. Allowing these young people to participate freely at the end of between 10 and 12 years as citizens, and yet at the same time to respect the fact that their parents who violated the law should not be allowed citizenship was a key part and a component in this discussion. We'd like to do more, but right now we needed something that we could agree on to begin the discussion. We recognize long-term that nothing happens unless the president has a chance to look at it and to offer his suggestions about fixing it long-term, and can offer support to House members as well. This is a step. It is the first step, but nonetheless, this will have some very strong support among both Republicans and Democrats, a first step only. And once again, I want to say thanks to both Susan and to Joe for allowing me to participate with this team that they're trying to develop in the middle of this entire concept to find ways to move forward in the United States Senate. And I have appreciated my working relationship with Angus King, independent from Maine, who has also stepped forward and said, let's find a way to move forward and to have something that we can actually talk about, modify, and make into the best possible product. The one thing we all know, this bill, regardless of what you say, would be better on border security and better on immigration than the failed system that we have today. It's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
I think Susan made one of the most important points, and I want to begin by quoting our president, a little over a month ago at the White House. He said, we're going to come up with DACA. We're going to do DACA, and then we can start immediately on phase 2, which would be comprehensive. I think that's very important. Later on in the same meeting, he said, I think we have to do DACA first. That's the premise that we've worked on. This is a narrow bill designed to confront 2 issues. And then later that evening, the president tweeted, that same evening of January 9th, he said that the border security has to be part of the DACA discussion. We agree. That's the bill we're presenting this afternoon. And it is narrow. And as many of you know, the Department of Homeland Security issued a press release this morning critical of this program. And I went through it. It's mostly critical of what's not in the bill, things that aren't in the bill, and they were never intended to be in the bill. And this is merely a first step, but it's an important first step because the time is ticking for these young people who have been in their country, in this country, in our country, and this is the only country they've known. The time is ticking for them. And also, it's time to step up and address the issue of border security. So I think that's what really has to come through. The other piece is, let's not kid ourselves. This is the only bill that has a chance to get through the United States Senate. It is the only bill that has any level of bipartisan support. So if we fail this afternoon, not if we fail, but if the votes aren't there, then there is no solution for DACA, and there's a delayed solution for the border. So I think this is a critical moment, and I know this is a difficult vote for many of our members, but this is a vote where really we need to focus on what's in the bill, and what's in the bill is dealing with these young people and dealing with border security. And there are many other issues. I would urge the president, whose party controls both houses of our national legislature, that we could start on comprehensive immigration reform next week. That could be the next initiative. All of us here stand ready to do that. There are difficult issues that need to be addressed, but we're not going to be able to do all of the things that have to be addressed in a narrow bill in the time frame in which we have to operate. And I guess finally the thing I'd like to say is how extraordinary it is to have this group here who have met literally daily, almost every day, phone calls on weekends, some weekend meetings for the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get to this point, who've been in good faith, who've trusted one another, who've had open discussion and debate, and we have, I think, a bill that we can be proud of. And I just hope the president will take a look at what we have proposed. And although it is not comprehensive immigration reform, I think it meets the 2 criteria that he set forth in that January 9th meeting, DACA and border security. And that's what we've intended to do, and I think that's what we've done. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take some questions now if you want to direct them to anybody or just a question in general. Start right here. Go ahead, throw it up.
Collins, the White House just issued a veto threat on an amendment, which is pretty rare. Senator King mentioned the DHS statement, I think 2,000 words, that was rather scalding, which is also a little rare from an agency. What's your response to how the administration is treating the proposal and operating right now?
Well, I'm personally very disappointed in the administration's response. The press release that was put out by the Department of Homeland Security is a real disservice to the brave men and women who work every day to defend our borders and to do internal enforcement. It has a lot of statements in it that are absolutely false, such as saying that it would expand chain migration. The opposite is the truth in this bill, although it does not take a comprehensive approach, and we make no bones about it. I'm going to ask Lindsey Graham to respond in more depth to this issue. It'll be more colorful.
So you got the president, who is most days pretty good on this. The January 9th Tuesday Trump was awesome. Show back up. Get us to a solution. Obama tried, Bush tried, they failed. Mr. President, you can do this if you will just step forward and be the guy that we saw on January the 9th. You don't want comprehensive? Well, we gave you something less than comprehensive. You say you want comprehensive. We're going to move to comprehensive next. As to the press statement, I said, who the hell wrote this? Because it sounded like something that came from a political hack, not DHS. And guess who I found wrote the statement? Tom Tancredo's press secretary. Yes. So as long as Steve Miller is running the White House and Tom Tancredo is in charge of DHS, we're going nowhere at fast warp speed. You got the two most extreme characters in the town running the show. What do you expect? This press release was offensive to most of us, and it was like Tom Tancredo never left. And if you don't know who Tom Tancredo is, look him up. It explains everything. Mr. President, you're being led down a path where we won't get a result. Reject this kind of engagement with the Congress. Tell us what you don't like in a constructive fashion. I'll end with this. What's wrong with Washington? You give DHS $25 billion of the money they asked for, and they slam you. You give a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million DACA recipients, and the left calls it the worst civil rights abuse in the last 100 years. There's some crazy people around here. Just shut them out. This is the best shot you'll ever get. America's with us, Mr. President. You be with us. We can make this bill better, but we're not going to turn this agenda over to the apostle of Tom Tancredo. Steve Miller is never going to run the show here and get you a successful outcome. Go where the American people are. The American people want the border secured, and they want the wall you talked about, and you can get it. The American people want to give these young folks, the DACA recipients, a better life to live in the country. This is the only place they know. And we'll go to the parents next, and we'll go to E-Verify next, and we'll do legal immigration, and we'll do merit-based immigration next. But, Mr. President, listen to the American people and lead us in Congress, and all will turn out well. If you turn this agenda over to the most extreme people on this issue, you're going to fail like Obama and Bush.
Let me just say, to interpret that, the Senate is designed to work in a bipartisan way, and what you saw as a bipartisan group of people, and defined by our bipartisan, one of our bipartisan partners here, Lindsey Graham.
Let me just address the veto issue, because it was reminiscent. It was 3 years ago, February 2015, I was a co-sponsor of a bill with Democrats and Republicans that we were introducing to tie President Obama's hands with respect to negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. And he called me on the floor and he said, "You are my friend. If this bill passes, I'm going to veto it." And I said, "Mr. President, we are the Article 1 branch and you are the Article 2 branch. We don't play Mother May I with you, and we don't take away powers that you have. We have to do what we think is in the best interest of the nation, and then you can decide what you think is in the best interest of the nation." The bill we introduced passed on a bipartisan basis, and he didn't veto it. I don't think we need to play Mother May I with an executive. We just have to do what we can to pull together and find common ground, and that's what this effort represents.
Now, let me just a second. Let me just bring this all back down to a center point again now, okay? As you can tell, the discussions that we had during this time were rather spirited. Lots of different ideas were discussed, and getting to this central point, trying to find a way to take care of the DACA kids and also to do border security became the focus that we really thought we could find some common ground on. We also recognize that the White House needs to be in a position of strength to begin with. They need to point out the fact that the chairman's mark is actually up for debate after ours is. If ours were to pass, it would make it very difficult for the chairman's mark to pass. And look, I'm going to vote for the chairman's mark. I respect what they're trying to do. I'm also voting for this one. So if this one doesn't receive the votes, they most certainly would expect that they would try to get the chairman's mark through. We get that. In the meantime, we want to be in a position, after everybody's tossed the bombs back and forth, to come back to a center part that says, how are we going to make this thing work? Because if nothing passes, as you've heard earlier, we're still back in the same position. The DACA kids are still at risk. These young men and women working in the military, they're still at risk. And at the same time, we haven't taken what the president ran on, which is to fix that border. So with everything else being said, and all of the bombs being tossed all the way around, the reality is there's got to be a group of us that can sit together, take a deep breath, and come back to how are we going to actually get something to improve the immigration system in the United States and actually fix the security along all of our borders. That's what this is all about, and that's what we continue to remind ourselves of. We're trying to find common ground. We know we can't do it without the White House. We understand that. But we've got to start someplace. So we'll take the best shots. I think for the most part, we probably won't return a lot of the fire. And when we get all done with it, hopefully, we'll find that centerpiece that the American people say Washington finally is going back to work.
Senator Rounds, there are a number of other Republicans who were part of most of these meetings. Senator Corker was one of them who said they're not going to support this final product. I'm wondering, why do you think you lost some of these people, and what's your message to your fellow conservatives as to why they should get the amendment?
I think there are a number of technical issues within the bill that some folks disagreed with, some of which we're going to be able to repair. There are some other areas that we really like to move forward on and perhaps add some things that would make it a better bill. But once again, what we're trying to do is to not just get to 60 votes in the United States Senate, but rather to 70 votes in the United States Senate, where probably 70% of both Republicans and Democrats could agree on moving forward. I know we're not going to be able to satisfy everyone, but let's make it better than what it is today. And for those individuals, in many cases, they brought up ways in which they really could, in my opinion, improve the bill. And I want to work with them to get that done. But we need to start someplace, and we need to do it with both Republican and Democrat support to get there. There's plenty of room right now for give and take. But the key issues, border security, which all of us conservatives agree on, and as a matter of fact, some of those who you might consider to be more liberal would agree with us on. The second part is we all know we have to address the issue of DACA. That's part of our goal as well. And I think even in a calmer environment, we all agree that the issue of the migration pattern that we've got right now, where there is more on family rather than merit, needs to be also addressed. We need legal immigration in the United States. Legal immigration.
Real quick, right here. Yeah. We got two more.
You've all been working very hard behind the scenes. What the American public has seen is a week of inaction on the floor. This could have been a week where we saw a 2013 style kind of floor fight. A lot of us were looking forward to that. Can you explain to the American public why it is that both parties have been able to have a really substantive debate, apart from the one you had behind the scenes? Because it seems like we don't have any resolution of this issue right now.
Well, okay, as soon as we brought out our proposal, you saw the fireworks begin. So in a lot of the ways, it was a matter of what can we do to refine it, what can we do to get as close as we can to something that we could present, and do it in a timely fashion. We did run out of time this week as well. The second part, and with all due respect to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle here, and I think some of my Democrat colleagues may disagree, but I really believe that Senator McConnell honestly intended to have an open discussion, but he was very disappointed with the fact that Senator Schumer decided to oppose even allowing the debate of two amendments that he believed was offensive. And I think that sent a real negative message to the folks on our side of the aisle saying, look, if you disagree, then vote against them. But and if you want to offer countermeasures until Democrats and Republicans realize that we can both play this tit-for-tat game and offer negative, something uncomfortable for both sides. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it was a matter of saying, no, we're not ready to debate these particular ones, so we're going to object and not let them come to the floor. I think that was a tactical error on the part of the Democrat leadership.
Senator, in the bill,
Who, hold on, I'm sorry, you did have, I know, but who'd you want to speak to? Anybody else?
Rounds, yourself, in the bill, you deprioritize deportations for virtually all illegal immigrants in the country, including up until June 30th, basically inviting a surge of illegal immigrants who will be deprioritized for immigration. Why move that date into the future for?
Okay, first of all, let's look at what the prioritization language says. It says that rather than going after a chemistry professor who has been in this country for many years and has contributed greatly to his community and sending him back to his native land at a time when he was on his way to pick up his child from school, that the first priority, not the only priority, should be to go after people who have committed felonies, serious misdemeanors, multiple less serious misdemeanors, are a threat to public health or safety, Wouldn't most Americans agree that that is where our resources should be targeted? And then we send a strong message to people who come to this country illegally after the bill is enacted. Just let me get to that point. And the message we're sending to them is they are going to be a priority for deportation, just the way someone who has committed a felony is a priority for deportation. We are going to readjust that back to January 1st, our original proposal for that date, but because it has been misunderstood. But what that is a deterrent. It is saying to people who come here after a particular date that we're going to focus resources on your deportation just the way we prioritize the deportation of criminals and someone who poses a threat to public health or safety.
Let me just say
Yes.
a quick word
Hold
about
on
that.
1 second.
I had a law professor who said always go back and read the statute, and the statute said shall prioritize. That doesn't mean to the exclusion of all other use. It just says this is where you start. You start with criminals. You start with people that have come in recently. You start with people who are threats to national security. It doesn't mean you're prohibited, and that's what the DHS press release suggested, that you're somehow prohibited from all other deportation activities. That's simply not what the statute says. I think the only other thing I would like to add, to go back to the very beginning, we've tried to give the president what he outlined back in January. And we have members on the Democratic caucus, I should say, there are members in the Democratic caucus who are very reluctant about this bill because of what it does for the wall. This bill doesn't make everybody happy on both sides, but it is an attempt to meet the requirements of the president, and I hope he can take yes for an answer. Because if this doesn't go, there's no answer, and this could drag on. You know, we have an immigration debate once every 10 years around here. We won't be able to solve this problem. This is a positive start, and we can then go to the next step, whether it's next week, next month. That'll be up to the leadership.
Senator, what are you going to do about the issue that
Go ahead, Ed.
caused such concern yesterday in Florida?
To whom are you
All of
asking
you.
that? I mean, I'm
What's the
happy to
question?
take it if you want, but
You guys have
do you
tried
want?
for several years to
Right.
tackle this issue.
Well,
No avail.
first of all, I think there are a number of steps that need to be taken. What happened yesterday is not only so horrific a tragedy, but it also has happened far too many times in this country. And Joe Manchin is the co-author of a bill with Pat Toomey, another bipartisan bill that would strengthen background checks. And I believe personally that that needs to be done. I have a bipartisan bill with Pat Leahy that is aimed at straw purchasing. That's when someone who's legally prohibited from purchasing a firearm uses someone who can buy a firearm to make the purchase for them. We need more by way of mental health services. It is so clear that anyone who would shoot children is mentally ill and needs help. And we don't invest enough in mental health in this country. So those are three very practical steps that we can and should take and that are overdue. And there's one final one that I want to mention that my friend Heidi Heydrich, is she still here? Heitkamp authored with me, and that is we had a no-fly, no-buy proposal. In other words, if you are so dangerous that you're on the government's list that says that you are not allowed to board an airplane, you are too dangerous to buy a firearm. So that's a fourth one that Senator Heitkamp and I were the co-authors of last year. I'm sure there are others who would like to.
Final question.
Thank you. The one gentleman in the white right there. Hold on.
Wait a minute. A female.
Senator Collins, can we just get clarification on what you just said about moving the enforcement date back?
We're going to clarify through a colloquy.
He's been trying. He's been in line much longer.
What's the whip count? How close are you to 60, and are Democrats going to land?
Chris?
Look, I don't think we will finally know exactly how. I don't think we will know exactly how many senators will vote for this until we're on the floor and we are calling the vote. There is a Democratic caucus meeting going on right now, the purpose of which is to reinforce the strong support of our caucus leadership for this bipartisan compromise. It is exactly the sort of compromise in which there are people unhappy in both caucuses about it because it either gives too much to the president of his priorities or doesn't go far enough in meeting the priorities of those who want to do comprehensive immigration reform. The great thing about a compromise is that it solves two, as this case does, two real problems right in front of us. I am optimistic that every Democrat will support this bipartisan compromise, and I am hopeful that we will get to 60 votes. But there is some work to do in the next couple of hours to clarify misunderstandings, to push back against misleading efforts by DHS and the White House to mischaracterize it, and to clarify why this is the one strong bipartisan proposal that can pass the Senate.
And I wanted to add one more thing on them. When I look back, having been involved in the comprehensive reform debate, if you remember that, I'd strongly pass the Senate. It was not easy. It was much bigger than this, and we had 68 votes. We had 14 Republicans voting for it. I think 11 of them are still here. So no matter what kind of things are written in press releases, this group believes that we can just stand in the corners throwing partisan punches if we want for the rest of the year, or we can actually get something done for the American people, and that's what this bill is about.
Thank you all.
Thank you.